welcome to Morning Buzz, Episode 4, Season 4. Are we excited? Wonderful. My name is Jake Rosen. I am the Senior Membership Manager here at the One Club for Creativity, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all here today. It has been an action-packed week here for Creative Week. Hands up if you've been to some Creative Week programming. Wonderful, wonderful. This week we've heard from agencies, brands, and freelancers making big waves in the advertising and design industries. And before we close out this season, we are so excited to welcome you back to our home here in New York City for one more episode of Morning Buzz. Some noise for Morning Buzz. Wonderful. If you're only just joining us today, where have you been? No, I'm just kidding. Very warm welcome to everyone. We are the One Club. We are the world's foremost not-for-profit celebrating and supporting the creative industries. As a membership organization, we run programs and events all over the globe, all year round, to uplift, to upskill, to support and inspire the global creative community. Earlier this week, we celebrated the Young Ones. I see a few faces who are at the Young Ones Awards. Some noise for Young Ones. And last night we had the ADC Awards, one of the biggest nights in art and design. It was a fabulous celebration. And of course, to close out the week, tomorrow, we have the one, the only, the One Show. So noise for the One Show. Great. Well, today's episode of Morning Buzz is going to be huge. We have an action-packed lineup here today to talk Standout Stories, centering the art of storytelling in a world full of disruption. First, we'll hear from CEO and CCO of West BBDO, Matt Miller, together with Johnny Corpuz, Head of Comms Planning at BBDO New York. Then the team at Murder Hornet, Noel, Cottrell, and Alex McInnis take to the stage. And last but not least, co-founder and president of Young Hero, Roberto Salas, joins us to close out today's episode. Some noise for our speakers. Wonderful. So, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage, we have Matt Miller and Johnny Corpuz from BBDO.
Hi, how's it going, everyone? And welcome to Morning, well, he already welcomed you to Morning Buzz, but welcome again. I'm Matt Miller, this is Johnny, and we are excited to talk to you today about the lost art of good advertising. What do we mean by that, right? Because I'm sure we're all sitting here going, there's a lot of good advertising. We're mostly talking about the definition of good, okay? So advertising is an amazing industry. It really is. And why? Because we use creativity. Right there is already proof that it's a great industry. We're not on spreadsheets. We're not like digging ditches, nothing against those, but we're using creativity to move people. That's the next amazing thing that we do, using creativity to move people to what? To drive business. I think this is pretty much the universal definition of advertising. Use creativity to move people to drive business. So if that's the definition of advertising, and we know that it works, you would think we can, through the deductive property, good means business results from moving people, right? That's what good advertising should be. Which means best is best business results from moving the most people, right? It's easy. So easy. It's so easy. See, Johnny agrees. It'd be weird if he didn't. Like, I'm like, oh, shoot. But is it that easy? Is the real question. Does our industry really believe that? Thank you. Hey, we already got some, yeah. Or does it kinda believe that? Okay, we did a little test, Johnny and I. We went out and we asked a few people 2 questions. The first question we asked, and these are all industry people, very accomplished industry people, what do you believe defines the best work in advertising? And here are some of the responses, and they're quite responsible. Clearly, effectiveness. Without it, there's no point. Okay, that tracks against the definition of good that we just established. If I don't say how the work performs, I'd be in big trouble. LOL, right? How successful it is in market. Same thing, different words. Performance and ROI, again, tracking against that definition of best work is moving the most people to create the biggest business impact. Great. Then we asked a second question. what does our industry believe is the best work? And this is where things started to get a little wobbly. The best work pushes the industry forward. I think we can agree with that, but notice something shifted. We're now talking about the industry. Second, let's just say no one shares how effective their work is on LinkedIn. It's all about the awards. So now LinkedIn, peers. Fame seems to be the most pursuit for people, whether it be, I extrapolated a bit, and it was individual fame, agency fame, and sometimes fame in the world or amongst the work, but fame was the pursuit. The most compelling 2-minute case study, right? I think there's a lot of head nodding, yep. I think it's hard to say, but often it seems it's whatever is the best solution for the client. So now suddenly the client decides, right? These days, we'll do whatever to keep the client happy. So probably that, right? Again, a lot of head nodding. We're feeling a lot of this. So look at this. We went from pretty clear definition of good when asked on an individual level what the best work is, which was performance in the world driving business forward. But when we ask what is our industry thinking, we start to talk about the industry itself, awards, clients, in personal fame, which means the question arises, whose ambition are we as an industry and us as individuals serving? Clearly, we've started to lose the plot. It's just true. You guys can't see each other, but as I was clicking through those definitions, different ones, yep, because it rings true. We're all experiencing that. We know what we're supposed to say, but we're in an industry that seems to be challenging what that's supposed to be. The definition of good for us as an industry is broken. We all are forgetting the real job of advertising, which means Cheryl's reaction matters more than me as a CCO's opinion. My job is to guide it, to figure it out, but her reaction matters more than my opinion of its quality. Rob's action matters more than the Cannes jury's selection. Sorry, Cannes. Did it actually drive Rob to action, or did you just think it was cool? Shauna's take matters more than Ad Age's review. Ad Age might be here, I don't know. Sorry, guys, but her take matters more than that review. And that's just the reality, if we all can still agree with our own definition of success, which is moving people that moves business through creativity.
It would be strange if we finished the presentation there, but obviously we've painted a really big picture about the problem, the issue, and the perception around what good is and how it's been a lost art. So it only makes sense that we give you guys all the answers, or at least what we think is an interesting way to look at creativity, not through a biased lens, but through a lens of which we can redefine and ultimately reclaim what good means. And as a strategist, you always do things in 3s or 5s. And so there's going to be 5 principles that we'll take you through around what good really means. The first one is that, as Matt said, good is decided by the market. We might think it's good in the boardroom, but if you look at Quibi, the market decided that that was not good. If you saw the slides for Liquid Death in a boardroom, you probably would have said, that's not good. That's just repackaged water. What did the market say? It's good. So ultimately, I think we can sit in our portfolio reviews or boardrooms, and we often try to dictate what good is, but oftentimes good rises to the top. So if it doesn't reach real people, if it doesn't make them do real things, then chances are it's not good by a market definition. So that's the first one. So good is decided by the market. Second, good is decided by the impact that it makes. And impact can be decided in many different ways. You have creative impact, so yes, did it win awards? You have cultural impact. Did it change people's behavior? Are people doing things differently? Are they rushing to Washington Square Park to see Lorde? I know I did. And finally, is it commercially impactful? Did it move the business? And ultimately, what we're all seeking in this room is all 3 of those things. If you think about what work people should be most proud of, it should be that you had impact at all of those 3 different layers. At the commercial layer, at the cultural layer, and at the creative layer. And so good is measured by the size of the impact. You want to be able to say, only my brand did this. This tagline still exists 10 years later. Snickers, you're not you when you're hungry. That's been running for 10 years. When you think about something that's big, bold, and enduring, that size of impact, it's really easy to trace Chen's short-termism, but the size of the impact is what matters. Third, this will hit us all because, creative people get jealous. Insecure and jealousy, two things you should get really used to. But ultimately, good is jealousy-inducing. The amount of times I, send out an email, or recently I sent out the mischief work that they did recently, and I said, I wish we made that. I wish our agency did that. Good work is jealousy-inducing, It wants us to all raise the creative bar. We all want to do better work. So when we are doing our best, everyone is jealous. And when we aren't doing our best, I think our peers might say, yeah, that's a little bit of BS, or that was just for an award show. So we want to make people jealous. Good is about making people wish that they had the idea, the creativity to come up what we had. 4, good doesn't have to be first. Innovation for innovation's sake is a waste. How many times have you heard people say, I want to be first to market? I don't want to do that. I want to be best to market. If you think about all of the best products in the world, they were generally the second of their time. Do you know what Nokia's highest selling day was? The day after the iPhone came out. And so they would have been there. They said, hey, we're first to market. The new phone just launched, and we're at the top of our sales. But they didn't focus on being best to market. They were reliant on being first to market. So as we think of creativity, as we think of innovation, just because we've seen someone use technology, or just because we've seen a different idea that's come out, doesn't mean that we shouldn't pursue that. It's about being best in market, not first to market. And finally, good gets remixed. I think 5-10 years ago, when creativity was blurring the lines with social media specifically, everyone was saying, how can we get this reshared? It's all about reshares. Resharing is table stakes. Resharing is me saying, oh yeah, I kind of like that. But when someone can take your idea, they can remix it, they can make it their own, that is the true barometer of creativity. If we look at Charlie XCX and Brat, the strength of that wasn't just because it was so breakthrough, but there's been a ton of articles written about it. It's because she gave us all something that we could remix and make our own. It gave us something that we could take creative ownership over. So these days, when we look at what's good advertising, it's not how many reshares did it get. It's, was it talked about on late night TV? Was it remixed into different memes? Is there a TikTok sound now because of it? These are all signs that the creative idea was taken on by people and made into their own. So that's 5. So remember the rule of strategists, 3s or 5s. So those are the 5 things that we think, in the age of the art of good advertising being lost, these are the 5 things we can do. We can make sure that good is decided by the market. The market is who we want to impress, not the industry. Secondly, good is measured by the size of the impact. Is it enduring? Is it commercially impactful, culturally impactful, and creatively impactful? Did it make people jealous? Did people send G-chats about our work and say, I wish I did that, or that is such an obvious and interesting insight? How did they get there? Good isn't about innovation for innovation's sake. Best to market beats first to market every day of the week. And finally, is the idea good enough that people make it their own? They can repackage it, reinterpret it, and remix it for the world. If you can do these 5 things, Matt will give you a job. No guarantees. But that's the trap, and that's ultimately what we want to share with you guys today, is that let's not equate noise for impact, right? Virality doesn't mean it's valuable, loud doesn't mean lasting, and it being seen doesn't mean that it's been effective. So we've lost the good art of advertising. We all need to come back to it. This is an example that we want to play that came out of BBDO West. Perhaps you've seen this campaign, maybe not. It's a B2B campaign, but you definitely will recognize the people that are in it.
Pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter. Whoosh, whoosh. Drip, 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 whoosh. Splash, splash.
The Office.
The Office.
The Office, one of the most popular TV shows on American television.
a cultural phenomenon famous for its beloved characters, terrible at running a business. So in 2024, AT&T Business reunited the cast, not just to star in another B2B campaign, but to launch a real new company with them that everyone could interact with. Led by the show's most dysfunctional worker, Rainn Wilson. Because if we can help their business succeed, we can help anyone's. AT&T Business presents Sleep with Rainn. First, Rainn launched the new company where all business people go, LinkedIn. Then, they introduced a product designed for business owners who were losing sleep over it.
The innovative sleep therapy device that uses cutting-edge sonic technology.
It's a pillow with a speaker in it.
You can't dream if you can't sleep.
And an interactive site where they could get their hands on one. On Spotify, a guided sleep album could be seamlessly paired with the pillow. And when the hype was at an all-time high, we launched the new company with a 6-minute-long episode showing some of the challenges faced by small business owners.
Rainn Wilson pillow recording session, take 1. Oh, listen, the cry of a passing heron. Tell your mind to shut up.
You better not post that.
I just had the best 6 minutes of my entire year.
It made our B2B campaign international news, becoming the most successful business campaign in AT&T's 150-year history in just 7 days. Oh, and the pillow? Yeah, we totally ran out. All while reassuring business owners that AT&T can help any small business succeed, even those with the most dysfunctional employees in America.
Step aside.
I sold a pillow.
Yes.
If AT&T approves that, I'll buy them T-Mobile.
So we might be biased, but that's good. That's good advertising. And the last thought we want to leave you with today is that if we want the world to care about our work, we have to care about the world and real people and real results, and not just ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I think there's a Q&A.
Thank you, Matt and Johnny. That was wonderful. We've got some time for questions from the audience. Does anyone have a question for Matt and Johnny today? We've got one over here.
I think we made it 24 minutes without saying the word AI, so great job, but also based on those criteria, can AI do good work?
You.
I think a human using AI does good work. But, you know, the old parable is a fool with a tool is still a fool. And I think ultimately it's the human that uses AI that has the great idea. A way that we think about it at BBDO is we use AI as inputs or outputs. So we use it to gather research. We use it to make lots of different versions, prototype, make mock-ups in really big speed of what we need to do. But the stuff that's crazy and messy and hard and human in the middle, that's all us. And I think if you have that mindset, AI can be beneficial to you and that you're not beneficial to it.
Great. Got another question in the back here.
Okay, so I have a quick question that is hard to ask because I feel like it can sound prideful, but I feel like it's an answer we haven't gotten. And so I feel like in the industry all the time we're told, like, have a super good idea, be so convinced it's the right thing, but as soon as someone tells you it's not, be ready to break up with it and move on. And I feel like that's good almost always, but what happens if it is a good idea and you're told no because, oh, that won't win this award? Like, when do you know when to push it, and when do you know when to break up with it and leave it behind?
So first of all, if you're being told it's not good because it won't win an award, you're at the wrong agency. I'm just going to say it. If it's a good idea, it should be looked at through the lens of its impact, its correctness for the brand, and how we believe it will drive business. If they're like, that's not award worthy, it's like, okay, you little pompous dick, go move on, right? So if that's the reason, I would challenge the filter at which they're making that decision. If that isn't the reason, and it's just we don't agree that it will have the same level of impact that you do, you can put it in the drawer and try to sell it to a different account, or believe in your own abilities to continuously come up with great ideas that can continuously be the answer. One thing we always tell our younger creatives is the job is to be the source of the solution. Believe you're an infinite well, right? You're gonna be chopped down, cut down, put aside, your ideas are gonna be rejected. If they're rejected for the right reasons, know that you have it in you with your own capabilities, your own access to tools to keep coming up with the next great thing and save those gems that might not have been right for the moment for some other moment in time. But believe in yourself and your ability to keep going and challenge the filter if the filter is wrong.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matt and Johnny. That was a fantastic talk. Big round of applause for
Thank
Matt and
you,
Johnny.
everyone.
Oh, grab the clicker. Wonderful. Alrighty. Whoop. I am very excited for our next guests. Two of our great friends here at the One Club. Not only are they from one of the coolest agencies I've come to know, they also run incredible events in Atlanta as the leads of our One Club Atlanta chapter. Yes, that is right. The One Club operates chapters right across the country, from San Diego to Miami to Atlanta to the Carolinas. So if you're tuning in at home, make sure you check out oneclub.org. There's probably an event coming to a city near you. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Noel Cottrell and Alex McInnis from Murder Hornet.
Hi, everyone.
Hey. I was actually going to start and just ask how many people in this room are either freelance or don't necessarily have a job yet and are probably going to be freelancing until they find a job. Anyone raise their hands? It's kind of interesting because it's probably 50%. And we're finding that more and more like in our industry, that is kind of where it's skewing to. Just largely because of like some of the biggest shops shrinking and obviously like, sort of people being, like the whole industry changing. There's a lot of people out there freelancing. So we've tailored our talk to how to do great creative work as a freelancer, because I think that, you're hearing from a great agency like BBDO and they've got a system to get to great creative work. How do you as a freelancer, when you're sitting outside the industry, how do you get to great creative work? So it's a little bit of self-promotion in terms of the model that we're building for it, but it's also a little bit of like, hey, here's some good advice and some things to think about as you who are not sitting in an agency. How do you get to do great work and perhaps win awards if you're lucky? Yeah. Honestly, I think that freelancers, the journey is impossibly hard to get to great work, but we're trying to make it easier. So if we go to the next slide.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here and say, we've outlined some pain points from what we've seen in our experience of working with primarily freelance talent. And, we operate off of a hub and spoke model, and we have a smaller core team, and we don't need to get into all that now. But we work with tons of freelancers day in and day out, and we're talking to them all the time. And these are the pain points that they've outlined to us. The ones in white are more like operationally focused, and the ones in orange are more creatively focused. And how does that correlate to getting to good creative work or not? I'll just dive right in. Finding the gig, you all know it's very challenging to just find that brief, that project, that campaign that's suited to you and your talents, and partner up with an agency to get that job.
Yeah, I mean, finding the gig is a full-time gig. I mean, if you're on LinkedIn, for example, and I probably get like 50 to 100 people in my inbox every day being like, hey, here's my reel. This is what I'm doing. There's a lot of hustle there. And that can take a lot of that creativity out of you. Because like eventually you're just like, I just need to find a damn job that's going to pay the rent. So finding the gig is creatively sucking already, We talk about the next one being half-assed onboarding and assumed knowledge. I would say at every agency where I've brought freelancers in, and that I've worked at the biggest agencies, VML and McCann, and there's literally an assumed knowledge. You're coming in like, you're coming into a brand where it might be a financial company that's got like stuff that you know nothing about. There's an element of assumed knowledge. It's very hard to do great work without knowledge. So that's another one of the pain points. We'll get to kind of how we're trying to solve them later, but that's kind of an interesting one.
And then just continue to move down the line, like feeling removed from the larger team. You're kind of just slotted in. Your main point of contact is that resource manager. You may not even know who the full creative team is. You know, you definitely don't have access to the client, which is so essential in just putting forth great creative work, because, you know, that tends to be rooted in trust. And, you know, how do you kind of like get through all of that in order to get to great creative work? It's very, very challenging. And then tied to all that, you're not producing your own work. So you hand over that great idea that you know is award-winning or perfectly suited for the brand, and then you don't even see it produced and like put into the world. You just hand it over. That sucks. Moving more into the operational side, getting paid late, sometimes real late, that'll suck the creativity out of anything.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how much time you probably spend as a freelancer chasing down like your bills and how you're going to get paid and when you're going to get paid and all that stuff. The other thing is, I would say the feeling removed from the larger team is worse now that we're so remote. I would say as a freelancer, you used to like go in, get onboarded, work in the agency. I would say that's probably been cut by half at least. I think most freelancers on are freelancing over Zoom. So you're hopping on a call, then you're hopping back to like your dog and you in your apartment. And it's like feeling removed from the broader team. That's definitely a moment where you're like, it was slightly better before COVID, because we definitely were more, you could be in the agency and make friends and get to know people. And actually there was more of a road to a full-time job, because they would meet you and you're not just popping on for 5 minutes to talk about your work.
Yeah, and I think, you know, another point I'd like to mention there is people are choosing freelance because of the world we live in today. And we'll get to that in a bit more depth in a moment. But, you know, you shouldn't have to sacrifice, you know, a more flexible lifestyle because you want to feel connected to a larger team. We believe you should be able to have both.
And the award credit thing's an important part. Like I would say that a lot of freelancers that I talk to go, like, our name wasn't even on that thing. We came up with the idea, we moved that idea along, we presented it, it went to the client, and that's the last we saw of it. Our gig ended, and then you see it up on stage at the one club, and your name isn't on the pencil. You're like, what the hell? Like that, like freelancers need that as much as anyone else, if not more. Like I'd say that freelancers need it more than someone who's got an agency job. And I would say that finding the gig again starts all over again, because it actually starts about 2 weeks before you finish your other gig, because you're like, oh shit, everything's drying up on June 1st. I got to get hustling again. And so then you kind of, even if you're working on something, you're already taking your eye off the ball and you're doing something else. So we're going to talk about our model a bit and how we're trying to solve for some of these pain points.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just talking about like, is there hope? I would say like, not all the best creatives are at the big holding companies anymore. Like I think that, yes, there are a lot of great creatives. I would say at the top, and I mean, this is not controversial to say, if you're over the age of 50, no matter how good you are, there's a good chance you're not in a holding company agency anymore, unless you're the CEO, CFO, COO. Like everyone's just getting shepherded out at like 50, and they're like, thanks for playing.
Are you speaking from experience?
I'm speaking from experience. But it's like, and then you're either going to go to freelance, or you're going to create your own shop and take a run at it, or you're going to retire if you've somehow managed to make enough money in our industry, which is very unlikely. So I would say that's a big part of it. And not all the big clients are there either. I mean, we've got a Fortune 75 anchor client that's like one of our clients. Like, they came from big agencies. We've got a global brand, Lipton and Tazo, who came from big global industry, big global agencies. We're starting to find that those clients are willing to say, I can find my people there, and I can find a dedicated team there, and maybe not need the sort of traditional network that they've sort of come to rely on. Of like, I would say that there's obviously a need for the giant big holding company agencies. There are, and particularly if you've got global work, or if you need like, you know, real in-depth stuff, and you've got 50 brands that are all being run a certain way. But I'd say that a client, if they know what they want, they know what the deliverables are, and they're kind of willing to go for a small agency, they're more and more doing that. You're finding big clients going to smaller shops. So that's exciting, you know, for us. Clients being comfortable with multiple agents in housing. I would say more and more clients are saying, hey, we're the agency a little bit. Like, we as the client are the agency, and now we're going to hire people. Like, we're going to have 10 different shops. You're going to do activations. You're going to do creative. You're going to do PR. You're going to do, it doesn't have to be a one-stop shop anymore. There's so many startups, I will say, like Alex is going to talk a little bit more to that. And some of the models, some of the new models kind of do favor freelance, which is interesting. So if you're a freelancer, if you're sitting in the room, take some notes, because we've got some of our competitors' names up as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the ecosystem is changing.
Well, I forgot this is my slide. Like when we talk about like not all the best people at the holding companies anymore, we did a big project for Zoom about a year ago, like big launch of their contact center. We used Chris Rowson to do a lot of the design. He's ex-head of design for TBWA. We also used Lucas Braun out of, I want to say Amsterdam or Germany, to actually design stuff. We used, do you remember the name of the woman who did the design?
Eva Kremers.
Eva Kremers, out of Holland to do the design. So we had no one internal touch this creatively. And actually, what did I say? Darren Barino did the art direction? I'm trying to remember.
You haven't mentioned that yet.
Okay. So we had just a full-on freelance team do a giant project for Zoom, and it worked fantastically well. And Chris, you know, like I'd phone Chris, I'd be, we got a big design project for Zoom, and he'd be like, I'm laying my front yard, my driveway, but I get, like, he's like, can you do it next week? I'm like, sure. So there's that element of freelance that's definitely like, he's still living his life, and he's working for us, doing big Zoom projects, which is pretty cool. I'm not gonna hit on everyone here. You know, Deanna is someone out of Brooklyn who's a brilliant art director. We work with her non-stop. I mean, she's on contract with us pretty much all the time. And she runs a lot of our stuff, and she's on calls with clients. Really, really great. Ariana Gerardo, she's shooting stuff for us this week. She was she was Giant Spoon's head of sort of content creation, and she's just gone freelance, and she's doing a lot of great stuff. She's a freelance content creator. She's awesome. And then, I mean, the rock star in the room, Suzanne Powers, like literally probably one of the best 3 planners in the country or the world. Ex-McCann, and, you know, ran MasterCard, all these giant companies, all the way through all the big famous work. And she's out there now working on big projects for big clients. I would say these are just like literally a handful of people, but across all disciplines, design, like copywriting, content creation, strategy, there's great people out in the world who are not sitting in full-time jobs. So that's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so these are some of our fellow independent agency friends that are operating on this more innovative model of like larger freelance teams, smaller core teams. Beers with Friends is a very agile, sprint-based agency, and they do like 2 to 3 week projects for big brands, and it's like in and out. All the work is in and out the door, and they work very, very quickly and assemble these teams at lightning speed. X&O is New York-based, and they do projects with very senior level creatives that they hand pick, and they all remain anonymous throughout the workflow, which is very interesting, and they all get code names, and it's fun to be like Mr. Orange or Mrs. Blue is working on this project. We Are Rosie is an Atlanta-based, originally staffing firm turned like hub and spoke model agency. So they used to place freelancers at agencies depending on the project brief, problem, campaign, and they called them Rosies. And now they're taking those Rosies and actually addressing briefs that they receive from brands. So very interesting. I'm not gonna go through the rest of these, and then of course us, Murder Hornet, but the ecosystem is truly changing, and we're seeing the benefit to freelancers, and it's just the talent is on the rise given the changing of the world and the flexibility that people demand of their lives.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Just to talk about Murder Hornet just briefly is, can we go back one? Just because I was just going to talk about what's different from us is a lot of the other agencies are very small and are staying small. So it's 2 or 3 people and outsourcing everything. We started that way, but as the clients kind of start to predict where you go, so we've got some bigger clients now who need more full-time hand-holding and that. So we're growing our internal team a bit. Alex and I started the agency 18 months ago. I think we're 13 people internally now. We use 30 to 50 freelancers a day. But we have a database, which we'll talk to in a moment, which is 1,000 people who we tap into. And so it's just slightly different in that we call it our nest and our swarm. Like Murder Hornet Nest is our 13 people, and we're kind of growing that slowly. And then the swarm is everyone we tap into.
Mm-hmm. And so at Murder Hornet, we love this quote, be orderly in your life so that you may be violent and original in your work. And it lives in our creds deck, and it's more so meant to represent the way that we operate as an agency to what Noel was describing, the smaller core team that's very operationally sound, and then the larger freelance team that's allowed to be creatively violent and create that creative chaos that gets to really great work. However, as a freelancer, I would urge you to also, assume this quote in your life. The more operationally sound you are in your own business as an individual and as a freelancer, the more creatively violent that you can be, because you remove that kind of like cognitive overhead of like, am I going to get paid? You know, where's my W-9, my 1099, you know, what have you, that kind of like operational bullshit that kind of tends to bog you down. Get that really, really focused and tight, so then you can be truly creative and, you know, partner with these agencies in a way that allows you to be your own LLC. Okay, so now we have a little inverse slide of pleasure points. Again, white is the more operationally focused, and then orange is the more creatively focused. So go ahead. You lifted the mic. Go ahead.
I'll go orange.
Okay. So we're going to dive into this. We have a little clip we're going to show you of how we do things at Murder Hornet in particular, but we have this Kick the Nest page on our site, and you all will be able to access a QR code on one of our final slides to take a look at that. But what we do is we have freelancers or prospective swarm members sign up on our site. You get added to the swarm, and you put in all of your details. Brands you've worked with, link to your LinkedIn, link to your book, first name, last name, where you're located, your preferred rate, etc. And then once you're in the swarm, you'll get a dedicated person at Murder Hornet to help you with any and all onboarding logistics. So once we, we find you in our database, when we have a brief and we determine that you'd be perfectly suited for that project, we would have someone reach out to you and make sure that you have everything you need to be set up for success and vice versa. So making sure that 1099 is filled out, that NDA is signed, you have your Murder Hornet email address for the duration of the project, your billing is all set up, and we always pay on net 30.
Yeah, and basically the way we see it is you are the larger team. We pitched Lipton and Tazo Teas, and Darren Barino, the art director, was in the room. Julia Chesky, who was doing social, was in the room. Our planner, so like head of strategy, was in the room. All those people who are freelancers were in the room in the pitch with the client, and I think that's makes a big difference for us, and also even for freelancers who are in the room like that. Being able to talk to a client, convince them that you can do what you do, it's a great sort of setup there. And then most times our freelancers go on production. Our first big production for Tazo and Lipton, I didn't go on the shoot, sent a really senior like ECD art director on the shoot. Next big shoot in Vancouver for a financial client, ECD freelancer went on the shoot. We're definitely empowering freelancers to do those things, because we go all the way back to what we started talking about. This is the only way to get freelancers to do great creative work. Like if you're not in those meetings and if you're not on production, you're literally relying on someone else who may not be as talented as you to actually do the work and to actually get the work out there. So it's kind of like the more we can put you in there, all the better, you know. And then your name will be on any work entered. What is interesting is like the first battle we had was a couple of people who were freelancing for us wanted to put their company name on there on the award entry, and that's the first time we were like, I don't know if that works, because then it's like Murder Hornet and 3 other agencies produced this work, but we're willing to put your first and last name on any work that's entered, and I think that's also, it's great for people who are freelancing, because that's how you get more freelance work. And when we PR it, if we're on LinkedIn and we've won awards, you're going up there, you can repost it as your work. I think that's another pain point a lot of the time. Like you'll see your work out in the wild, you can't go on LinkedIn like, hey, I did this whole campaign. Or if you do, that agency will never hire you again. So we're trying to free all that stuff up. The whole dirty little secret freelance thing. I mean, I ran a big department 2 or 3 times in my career, and freelance won every pitch for me because I never had the resources to pitch it with people who were internal. I was always pitching it with freelancers, and that was the kind of unlock aha moment of like, hey, we could build an agency around this model rather than like let the dirty little secret out. So
there's such a benefit. Stitch it on a pillow. Yeah, and then we'll just close this slide in saying that we have a high rate of returning swarm members, because you do feel like you're a part of the process and you know you're being additive, and there's something to that will make you want to return. All right, here's a little clip we have that kind of outlines this process in a very digestible way.
And we only realized afterwards we were talking to a room full of creative people, we didn't put any creative work in the presentation. But it's going to be up to you to create that work, because we're honestly, that is what we do. We're a freelance model, and we're looking for people to help us do great creative work. We're 18 months old. We have some great big clients. But I will say that it's really exciting for us to meet freelancers and to add them to the swarm and to get to work with them more and more often and try and get to great work. It is a different model. It's new. It's kind of different. But we're seeing traction with clients. Again, 18 months in, real traction and having a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the next slide was.
I think it's our QR code.
Ah, yes. So this is really just to take a look, QR it, have a look, get on there, go to the kick the nests part of the thing, fill it in, reach out. And honestly, a lot of the time on LinkedIn, I'll just say to people, people ping me separately, I'll be like, hey, go to the Swarm page, get on there. And then I'll just sidebar with someone and be like, hey, this person's just added in, and let's use them for something fun, something good. So yeah, I mean, we didn't have a lot to show in terms of the work, but we definitely feel the model's different, and that we're trying to help freelancers and trying to get something out there, and just to shake this industry up. I think we're all feeling there's like an inflection point moment for the industry. There are different models, people are trying different things. We're finding this is really working for us and really working for freelancers. So I can also open it up for questions.
I think Jake's going to do that, but I do also want to say that Murder Hornet, our agency, our North Star is to be the agency for freelancers, because we think that they are so additive to the work, and it is the future. So that's what we're dogged on, and our creative ops lead is going to be like, did you guys just finish your talk? Because we just got 20 form submissions, but yeah, we can close it there for questions.
Thank you, Alex and Noel. Round of applause for Alex and Noel.
Wonderful. Some questions from the audience. We have one over here. Oh, one at the back.
Oh, sorry. Hi. I was wondering, I know you don't talk about money, but, well, we have to. Because I'm a woman, like money inequality and payment inequality is a real thing. How do you ensure that, all your freelancers are paid, like, equally, or are you transparent about payroll, and how do you ensure that all the freelancers that work on the project really, that they know about budget, I guess?
I'll take the big picture of that. Is our freelance rate is kind of locked at $1,300 a day, because the problem is it'd be impossible to deal with 1,000 freelancers. My day rate's $1,800, my day rate's $850, my day rate's so we have a locked day rate. Sometimes if it's a big project and we're getting someone for 2 or 3 months, we might try and negotiate on that rate. But if we're getting in someone for a few days or it's up to a week, we kind of keep it there. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, and I'll just say that we err on the side of just like national averages. So, some people are from New York and some people are from Des Moines, but that average is maintained just based on the national average of payment. And we always are open to negotiation. So state your rate, and we'll just talk you through like what the deliverables are, and we'll get to a place hopefully where we both feel good about money for output.
And I mean, to a point, like we've turned down a lot of freelancers who've just said, great freelancers we've worked with, and they've said like, my rate's $1,850 and I'm holding that steady for the whole 2 months. And they were like, I'm so sorry, we can't work with you. And that's kind of what it's like. But I will say I think actually some of the more junior freelancers actually benefit from that rate. People who maybe are used to charging $750 a day are suddenly getting $1,300. And actually it's kind of interesting, because a lot of the Europeans love working with us, because like they're used to getting a day rate in the UK of like £500 a day, and we're going like, there's $1,300 a day. So it's a kind of an interesting model. We had to get to find a place in the middle where we're like, we know we're not losing money at that rate.
Wonderful. We've got time for one more question, just over here.
Hi, yeah, there's a lot of people in this room that are either rising seniors in college or like kind of fresh out of that. And like, I've been a freelancer for a couple months now after graduating, and we'll be talking after this. But one of the big questions for getting into freelance work is, okay, I don't have any real work. Everything is spec up to this point. Like, what would you recommend to the room of students here to stand out, to make sure that they get put on these projects and are amongst people that they can learn from?
I hate to say this because it's it makes my life a little more difficult. But when you're just going on there and you're putting your name in, there's a lot of people in there, and we often do default to the people we know and the people we trust and the people who've done this before. But a lot of the people who like come to the events, we host events in Atlanta. We do drinks parties. We have Alex runs the Atlanta chapter of One Club for Creativity. Those people who are always there and always like, hey, have you got an opportunity? A lot of the time we'll be just like, oh, here's an opportunity, this is something. Or that might be emailing or inboxing or on LinkedIn. You've still got to have that high touch element to it. Even though we've got the database, we do tend to go back to the people that we know. That's so it's not the perfect answer.
And I'll just add, it's kind of like your network is your net worth, like that sentiment. Murder Hornet in particular has a lot of swarm community initiatives, like Noel's describing, but also a lot of them are virtually bound. So you don't have to be in Atlanta, because that's where we are, to make a name for yourself amongst our swarm. We have a mentor Hornets program. One of our mentors is actually in the room, and we set up junior creatives, because you obviously will put what level you are in your career when you submit the Kick Nest form, and we'll match more junior creatives with more senior creatives in our swarm database if that's of interest to you, and that gets you really good traction with us as well. It's just being part of these initiatives and having your name pop up.
Yeah, we have a book club, and we give out books to our swarm is it every month or is it every
quarterly?
Quarterly. It's we send out the books, and people who sign up and be like, I want to get the books, and then we do a Zoom and we all review the book and talk about the book. And it's if you're in those things, it's just slightly you're getting more face time.
And I would say that's the same for any of the other agencies that do freelance as well. It's finding those touch points that are outside of just throwing the link to your book at a resourcing manager. It can happen on LinkedIn, it can happen on Instagram, and what have you.
Wonderful. Another round of applause for Alex and Noel. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Alrighty, how are we feeling? We got time for one more. Who's excited? Wonderful. To close out episode 4, we have a very special guest with us. Someone who has a deep drive for exceptional leadership and is an incredibly talented creative. Please welcome to the stage Roberto Salas from Young Hero.
Hello, everyone. Got to practice holding this mic. Awesome. So I wanted to start by asking everyone 2 simple questions, maybe 3. But who's been binging the latest season of White Lotus? Okay, a few people. Who's been binging The Studio, that new Seth Rogen show, which is actually amazing. If you haven't, highly recommend. And then the last question, who's been binging the latest Starbucks campaign? Nobody. Thank you. I thought somebody would be rhetorical question. What I'm trying to present to you guys is give you this sort of new concept that we've been sort of evolving a little bit at Young Hero in the 7 years of our history, that maybe pushes a little bit the concept of how to approach storytelling through social media from a different lens. So I'm Roberto Salas. I'm one of the co-founders of Young Hero. Shout out to my partners right here in the second row. We've been around for 7 years, and at the core what we like to do is creator-led marketing. That means we can pretty much work on any single discipline because, we bring the right creators to the right briefs, and we make some pretty awesome, exciting work that hopefully people would want to talk about and hopefully binge also, just like we binge TV shows. So to get us started, back in 2013, my partner and I were working at 360i, and our creative director sort of asked us, hey, would you guys like to come work on Super Bowl Sunday at the office? And we're like, what? What are you talking about? We have this whole party, all these things happening back at home with our friends. But obviously, with the optimism that we always carry through our careers, we said yes. So we went, we were very prepared. It was the first time that at least I, heard about this concept of a newsroom and getting together everybody in the team kind of with assets ready and just be ready to react to whatever's happening, right? This was around the time that real-time marketing was a thing. If it wasn't for the Daily Twist, this probably wouldn't have happened. I never even worked on the Daily Twist. I literally just happened that Sunday, just worked on that Sunday. But it really triggered something, and it made me realize, the importance of being, in touch with what's happening out there culturally, because that's where you're going to be getting all the eyes and attention. So 2013, a lot of brands started to ask, like, and even for us, one of their biggest realizations is like, it's something that you cannot really control. It's kind of like a lot, it's triggered by luck, I think. So, but again, everybody, the next day, we go on Monday, and every single brand at the agency was asking for an Oreo moment. And we're like, oh man, okay, how do we do that? Because obviously, we were prepared, but it's something that you can't control. So the concept I'm about to share with you right after this slide hopefully gives the creative agency and the brand a little bit more control on how to drive that buzz and essentially not leave it up to luck. So before we go all that, I think it's important to go, a little bit on a quick trip down memory lane. Thank you for my shout out little cue note there. Because everything that's been happening since the inception, when Steve Jobs introduced us to the iPhone, has led to the moment that we're here. We got the iPhone in 2007. All of a sudden, we had literally the power of the internet in our hands, right? Around 2008, 2011, something that Facebook Timelines did was actually bring a lot of optimism to the creative agencies that were usually more focused around TV, print ads, very conceptual, very award-winning stuff, and everybody was kind of like against jumping into the social, digital side of the creative department. But Facebook Timelines did something cool because people all of a sudden realized, oh, I can create some sort of story narrative. I can be creative. I can push the platform forward, and it's not just this little square box. So I feel like, personally, that was super important. We actually, back at Ogilvy, we happened to work on this really cool Fanta campaign that had a very long sort of like story narrative and arcs that were actually triggered or kickstarted through the Facebook timeline. So again, something that was cool is that, okay, we can be creative on the desktop version of the internet. But then with Instagram, something that I feel is very true is that Instagram not only turned everybody into a photographer, because you could take a picture of a stapler, you put a filter on it, all of a sudden it's ready for the world to see, and it's amazing, right? But something that I feel Instagram did at that moment was take the focus from desktop and finally get people to adopt the mobile technology, being able to be on the go and using the internet, in a much more proactive and I guess more engaging way as well, because you could do it from anywhere in the world, not just sitting at your desktop or laptop. And then, that started to lead to what I was mentioning before, 2013, real-time marketing. Every single brand is asking for the quick reaction that gets a lot of buzz in 15 minutes. But obviously, it's something that we can't control. Then 2015, 2016, brands started to realize, oh, influencers, people are not just people, they're also billboards. They have a lot of followers, we're gonna give them our products, we're gonna be doing a lot of, box opening type content, and it's good, right? But then brands started to realize, oh, okay, maybe it's not good to jump on every single trend. Maybe because my brand values don't really align, or it's just something that maybe we shouldn't be. So it became a thing that people started to realize that maybe we shouldn't be jumping on every single trending topic out there. So we started to become a little bit more aware of what was happening. And that, I feel like, led to a little bit of the creator economy and where we are today, which is essentially finding strategic ways to align the values of creators with the values of the brands to tell, hopefully, long-term stories, not just quick pay-for-play, which is what was happening a lot in 2015, 16. So, and then another thing that happened with the creator economy is that brands started to realize that, what it says right there in green, people don't, trust people more than they trust brands. So that's how you start seeing all this creator-led marketing sort of taking over. So thank you for sticking with me through that. So what comes next for us, we think, it's like we're starting to see a shift. And it's kind of like going from reacting to what's actually trending out there to actually having a little bit more control, and as a brand, asking what is the world that we want to build so that it trends tomorrow. And now, that doesn't mean that we're going to be forgetting about what's trending. I think that's super important, but you'll see how we're going to start employing it. And I'm going to take you to a pretty awesome example that we did not have nothing to do with it, but I do think it's probably one of the benchmark projects out there. So just to give you a little pause and understand if the term showrunner, it's a little bit new. What we're calling the showrunner model is a creative framework or method for brands and agencies that want to build lasting intellectual properties through their brands and not just be, chasing fleeting impressions that, yes, they last 15 minutes, you get a cool headline, but then the internet moves on, and, the next day it's not relevant anymore. So with that said, if you don't know what a showrunner is, but you have been watching, in the last few years, Game of Thrones, if you binge the whole thing and you were someone like me that I would stick to the end of the show and I was waiting for the, director commentary, these two gentlemen right here were the showrunners of Game of Thrones. We're not going to talk about how they ended the show, that's for another time. But, in pure concept, in TV, a showrunner is the person who oversees the creative vision of a series, like a creative director. They align writers, cast, production, everybody to tell one simple story and one cohesive message. They have the holistic view of where they want to take that series. Now, I think we can do the same thing with a brand. So in advertising, that means that instead of creating a campaign, we're going to be creating cultural IP, intellectual property. How? Well, we're going to be building story arcs that people are going to be really hooked on, just like any TV that we all love, any TV show that we all love. You collaborate with creators whose values actually align with your brand, and then when you start using trends to build on the story arcs to be relevant, that's how you're going to hook people, and hopefully, you're going to turn your brand into a bingeable brand. And now, there's no better example out there right now, and again, we did not work on this or anything, I just love it so much. It's the Duolingo, the death of Duolingo. And I'm going to take you guys through this entire, how this saga sort of was kickstarted and took place. So, just brief synopsis, and then we're going to break it down. This is an Adweek article because they obviously made it to the cover. In February, Duolingo, infamous mascot, passed away following an accident involving a Cybertruck. That is your trend right there. This would later be one of the biggest, most successful stunts from the brand. Over a series of days and weeks, actually, the team dropped clues. Those clues were dropped on Reddit. They were dropped through their actual application for people who were already engaging with the platform. And also, obviously, they started all over the comment section, TikTok, Instagram, and everything. And people started to creating their own sort of theories of what happened to Duo. Then the company staged a funeral on TikTok. That's where creators came into place. That was watched by 66 million people, and everybody started to create their own sort of funeral for Duo. The CEO then came, and he actually read his eulogy on YouTube, obviously because it's a very CEO thing to do. And then everyone from the World Health Organization, Netflix, and even Dua Lipa sent their condolences. And you will see how fun that was. Now, before I get into really breaking down the story, I want to give you guys a tool if you really want to embrace this model. And it's something that, I'm going to shout out Nick and Zoe for bringing this to my attention because I wish I had this in my entire career. But it's a simple sort of like framework called a story clock. It was actually originally started by Dan Harmon's Story Circle. That's what it's officially called. But this guy, Seth Worley, created a workbook that you can go online and buy. But it's basically this sort of like clock system that you can actually employ to start sort of like coming up with long storytelling narratives. And I'm going to break it down really quickly. So the top part is always the order of your world. The bottom part is where the chaos, that's where the drama, that's what hooks people in, right? So the model says that you always start at the top at 12 p.m. So the U means that you are introduced to the character. Then you're introduced to the need. What does the character want? What's missing in the character's life? Then it's the go moment. It's right before we go from order to the chaos. And this is kind of like a hero's journey, sort of very general story. If you actually want to get into different genres, there's different ways to reformat the story clock. But I'm not going to get into that because it's way too complicated to explain. What happened there? So the search. The search is where actually the character starts to adapt to discomfort. So you'll see how we're going to apply this now to the actual advertising storytelling, social media storytelling, because you can start seeing where the creators fall into place, where the KPIs are actually help you set up, actually part of the need and all that. After the character finds all of that, what they are in search for, they finally take it. But there's a lot more drama. It's not that easy, right? If you follow for example, if you do this with Indiana Jones, it's like a lot of a lot of need, a lot of find, and a lot of take, all the way until you finally cross that chaos back into the order, which is a return. Something that's really cool, because if you really want to ideate in this way, all you need to worry about is the top 3 first, because then all you do is resolve what you set up in the opposite side of the clock. So the best example is like when the character right here at 3 p.m. goes go, at 9 they return. That's a simple concept, and it works in any other way. So, and then the last one, that change has happened. We live happily ever after, and that's how it works. So very general. Now, this is like how movies, TV shows are sort of made, and it's just like really simple tool that can help you figure out your long-term narrative. Now, let's use the Duolingo example, and I'm going to show you exactly how they did it. And maybe it was intentional, maybe it wasn't, but it follows it to perfection, and that's why we all got hooked, or at least I did. So, if you had the app, they had this thing that they started to introduce, and they actually got buzzed probably 8 months before they actually launched the campaign of the death of Duo. But you knew that if you weren't using your app, this whole purpose is to get you to keep doing your lessons. So the actual app icon kept sort of like getting sick and sick and sick. That's how they set up the entire thing. Then, the need. They started to announce, okay, I need people to, first of all, I need Dua Lipa to pay attention to me. That's as far as the character's dual narrative. But also, I need everybody to do their lessons because I keep getting sick. So what happens then? The brand announces the death of Duolingo with that post. Everybody started to freak out. How can they be killing, literally the entire app, because the character was the app. But then that started to trigger a lot of really fun conversation. People were volunteering their comments and everybody. And I think this area right here is when you can actually leverage creators to actually keep building almost like that wildfire effect for your story to go, crazy and buzzy all over the internet. So that's one example of one of the creators that they use on TikTok to build this really nice, tiny little funeral for Duo. Then we get to, the fact that we discovered that he actually died by Cybertruck. That moment right there is actually awesome because at the time that they launched that, everybody was hating on the Cybertrucks for many reasons that there's no time to talk about. But that was the post, and it got everybody riled up, and it became this amazing thing that all of a sudden people wanted to keep watching, and they were like literally they turned notifications on for anything that Duolingo was posting on Instagram, all of a sudden, or TikTok, all of a sudden you got that and you were following that story. But what's great is like, they're using all these different sort of posts in different outlets, in different medias, YouTube, TikTok, Reddit. So it really built this whole ecosystem so that everybody could be following the story. We're almost there, guys. Then the CEO created this sort of eulogy on YouTube. And what I think is great is because in the opposite side of the clock, you use your KPIs to sort of form the base of your story. And because of all the entertainment that went down all the way to that point, the CEO made this really funny eulogy based on the narrative that he was building, but he was able to embed a lot of the benefits, a lot of what makes the brand, the lessons, in a way that was entertaining. So nobody saw it as an ad, but everybody was watching it because there was already all this built anticipation leading until that point. So it's a huge win. And then, all of a sudden, we're obviously going to go back to the order. They announced that legends never die. Duolingo had to fake its own death so people could keep doing their lessons. And that was the whole point. So we went from the death, and obviously on the opposite side, he returns from the dead. And these were all the posts that were posted throughout this entire timeline. And at the end of the day, even Dua Lipa participated, and that was actually one of the major goals of Duo. So you can start seeing how this can be a very effective, simple, even though it looks very complicated with a lot of stuff in the cloud, but it's a super exciting way to actually create a long-term narrative. And what's really cool is that you start to implement creators in one point, you have your KPIs, and you obviously never leave the trends out because they're important, but this starts giving you more leverage to keep building one simple narrative that is consistent, not just in one moment, but for long term. And that's what we're trying to do. So this is just kind of like the anatomy, and it's a good way to sort of, put a metaphor or how you can actually see it. So a brand would be the network, right? The agency it's basically, you can see it as a studio. The creators are the writers, the directors, it's even the actors sometimes. The campaign becomes your season, and then you can keep changing it. The trends are your story arcs. They're super important. It's not like we're leaving them behind again. They are just part of your ecosystem now, and it's what helps you drive the story. The social channels are the scenes and the locations. To me, that's like the coolest thing. When you're watching a TV show, you go from a bridge to like an apartment and all that, and that's what YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, that's what they are. And then the results should be long-term ratings and people getting to fall in love with your brand just like they did with Duolingo. And now, just in summary, to sort of end this crazy topic that we're here to share with you, this is kind of like a little manifesto, because no advertising presentation should go without one. The showrunner model is not about chasing stories. It's about building worlds, developing character arcs, and knowing where the story is going, having control of that, not just crossing your fingers and hoping that your whatever activation you're doing trends. So it's not about interrupting, it's about entertaining, keeping people and bringing them and hook them in. It's rewarding loyal fans like they did with all the exclusive content that was dropped through the app if you were actually doing your lessons, and also obviously making new ones in the process. And that is the showrunner model, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. Time for a few questions for Roberto. Anyone in the audience? Wonderful. We've got one up the back here.
Hi. Do you think the showrunner model is right for all brands or all situations? Like Coca-Cola doesn't have a character, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's an interesting question because, it's easier when you have a character. It's easy when you have a consistent, character that people identify already with your brand, but you can definitely do it from scratch without really needing that. And I think one good example that we did at Young Hero was for Absolute Land. Absolute was celebrating the 10 years of going back to Coachella. It was kind of like 2-3 years after the pandemic, so they did, a lot of people weren't going to be attending the festival, but they really wanted to create that more global sort of like traction and get impressions. So they came to us. The metaverse was a thing, by the way. And we basically created this sort of story arc of introducing the fact that, they're coming back to Coachella, but they're also bought land in the Central End. So we started to create this intrigue. We worked with creators from the metaverse to sort of like curate who was coming, and then we created this gamified approach to a sweepstakes, which was basically telling people that if you find this specific coin, which is, again, it's literally the Absolute bottle has a signifier that it's like the brand, the little coin of the founder in the middle, and we basically hit that coin inside of the Central, and basically 2 people found them, and we teleported them to Coachella weekend 2 from weekend 1. So it wasn't led by one individual character, it was led by the epicness of the product, right? And that coin was sort of like that character in the story, I would say, maybe not at the same scale of what Duolingo did, but it was, you could start seeing like all the elements of the product embedded into this longer narrative that we were able to follow for 2 weeks. Yeah.
Wonderful. Time for one more question. Just over here.
How did you develop the showrunner model?
How did we develop the showrunner model? Honestly, it's something that we've been talking a lot about. When we were working, this was probably around 2019, Lobos 1707 invited us to basically be their agency and help them launch. And we had this epic, complicated stories of how, we had a founder from one side of the world bringing barrels to Mexico to mix, to have this completely complicated story. And Nick, one of my co-founders, had read, I think it was The Hero's Journey, right? And they talk about a lot about the story clock. The story clock also was by one of the guys that I mentioned. He actually created this workbook, and we started to employ it in our brainstorms. It's originally used actually for movie making or like for filmmakers to sort of develop TV series, and we started to use it in advertising. And in the Lobo 1707 case, we were trying to figure out, okay, we're shooting all over Mexico. We have all these stories. We have legacy over here. We have a big celebrity ambassador behind the brand. We also have this rich history of like, we don't want to be another tequila that literally has one person behind the brand. We wanted to make it all about unity. So we had a lot of elements, and we used the story clock in that case to sort of organize all the stories we wanted to tell in one fluid sort of story, and it worked. So since then, we've been using it every time we can.
Wonderful. Another round of applause for Roberto. Oh, you didn't? Thank you. Alrighty, everyone. That closes out episode 4 of Morning Buzz for this season. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's been our absolute pleasure having you in. Many return guests, so thank you for showing up. We've got so much more coming up this week. Of course, the One Show on Friday, but stay connected. Please check us out online, oneclub.org. We can't wait to see you next time. Thank you.